All right, today on The Explainer, we are jumping right into the life of Eva Perón. We're going to explore how a forgotten girl from the plains of Argentina became something like a political saint, and how her life story was forged into one of the most powerful and lasting myths in the world. So to really get a handle on the just unbelievable story of Eva Perón, we have to start with this question, which is honestly pretty bizarre. You see, her afterlife is just as crucial to understanding her myth as her actual life was. The answer tells you everything about the power she held and the fear she inspired. Her story, it doesn't start with power or fame. No, it starts with shame, out on the dusty plains of the Argentine pampas. This first chapter really shows you what happens when society pushes someone right to the very edge. Now, you have to understand, being born illegitimate back then, that wasn't just some small detail on a birth certificate. It was everything. It was a brand, a stigma that defined her entire childhood, and it absolutely became the fuel for the political fire that would come later. And this slide, it just lays out the brutal reality of the time. Her father basically had two separate families. On one side, the official one, respected, totally secure, and on the other side, well, that was Eva's family, unofficial, looked down upon, and with absolutely zero security or social standing. This was her day-to-day reality. And all of this really comes to a head at this one moment. I mean, can you even imagine? You're a little kid, you travel to your own father's funeral, and you're publicly turned away at the door by his other family. They were eventually allowed to go in for just a moment, but then were forced to walk behind the procession, at a distance. This single moment of public humiliation is what many people point to as the real origin of her deep hatred for the elite. So, at just 15 years old, Eva makes a break for it. She heads to the big city, Buenos Aires, to try and escape that past. She gets there with pretty much nothing but her own fierce ambition and her voice. Now, her first few years in the city were a real struggle, bit parts and forgettable movies, that kind of thing. But then she finds radio. And on the radio, playing these powerful women from history, she becomes a huge star. She was learning how to command an audience. And then, at a fundraiser for earthquake victims, everything changes. She meets the populist politician Juan Perón, and when those two met, it was like a political supernova was born. And this right here, this is a perfect example of her political genius. The rich elites, they use this term descamisados to insult Perón's working-class followers. So what does Eva do? She takes their insult and turns it into a badge of honor. She basically told them, yeah, that's right, we are the shirtless ones, and we're proud of it. She gave a voice to millions who had been silenced for generations. Look, when she became First Lady, she didn't just, cut ribbons and smile for cameras. No way. She completely reinvented the role. She built this massive social welfare empire, the Eva Perón Foundation. And just look at the scale of this. We're talking state-of-the-art hospitals, schools, housing. She was basically building an entire parallel government just for the poor. And this number, just let this sink in for a second. Her foundation's budget was 1/3. 1/3 of the entire national budget. Now, where did the money come from? It was a mix of things: state money, lotteries, and so-called voluntary donations from businesses and unions. Though a lot of her critics argued they weren't really that voluntary at all. But for the people getting help, she was Okay, so she's got this incredible control over social welfare. What's the next move? Well, she starts to formalize that power, to turn it into a real political machine. She's not just helping the poor anymore, she's organizing them into a force that could not be ignored. First, she pushes through the law giving women the right to vote, something activists had been fighting for ages. But she doesn't stop there. Oh no, she immediately creates the Female Peronist Party, a political machine run by women for women. And look at this, in just 2 years, it had 500,000 members. She brought hundreds of thousands of women into politics for the very first time. So all this organizing, all this power, it all leads to this one unbelievable moment. 2 million people, 2 million, flooding the streets of Buenos Aires with a single demand: Evita for vice president. I mean, at that point, it really seemed like her power was absolute, that she was unstoppable. But that massive show of support actually triggered a huge crisis. Things happened so fast. You have this massive rally, the people are demanding she run. But just a few days later, the military brass basically says, no way. We will not serve under a woman, especially this woman, as our commander-in-chief. and the threat of a military coup was suddenly very, very real. So she goes on the radio and gives this famous speech, and she just masterfully reframes the whole thing. She says it's not a defeat, it's a personal sacrifice for the movement, for her husband. And with that one speech, she seals her image as a martyr for the cause, a saint who would give up everything for her people. But the tragic truth was, Eva was already fighting another battle, a private one that she couldn't win. And her death? Well, that wasn't the end of her story. In fact, it was the beginning of its most bizarre and enduring chapter yet. When she died, it was a genuine national trauma. The entire country just stopped for weeks. But for her husband, Juan Perón, it was also a political opportunity. He has Congress officially name her the spiritual leader of the nation, and that's the first step in turning his wife from a politician into a permanent, almost divine symbol for his movement. And that process of turning her into a symbol, well, it became shockingly literal. Perón brings in this famous Spanish doctor, Dr. Pedro Ara, to perfectly embalm her body. And the technique was so advanced, she looked eerily lifelike. The plan was to build a huge monument with her body on display inside, like a modern-day saint for her followers to visit forever. But that monument, it never got built. Because in 1955, the military takes over, and they are terrified of what that body represents. They see it as a powerful symbol of resistance, so they steal it. And what happens next is this insane 16-year journey that sounds like it's straight out of a thriller novel. And the craziest part, their attempt to erase her actually made her more powerful. Hiding her body turned her into a martyr, a symbol for a whole new generation of revolutionaries. So after all that, how do we remember her today? Well, her legacy is just as divided now as she was back then. On one hand, you have Santa Evita, the saint of the people who brought dignity to the poor. On the other, a dangerous populist demagogue who used state resources to build a cult of personality. So which one is it? The truth is, she was probably both. And that really brings us to the core of it all, doesn't it? The incredible story of Eva Perón, from being this excluded child to having this immortal afterlife. It really shows you something. It shows that when a person becomes a symbol that powerful, they don't really belong to history books anymore. They belong to the people who continue to see themselves and their struggles in that myth.